always follows directions and is willing to accept our help and respond to our feedback, being very persistent and try hard all the time. If think about it, if our students has these this all this behavior, it will make teaching and learning so much easier. So when it comes to expectations, we do not just focus on what academic or functional academic skills we want to expect, but we also need to expect students to learn or to perform all this learning how to learn behavior well. Just like building a house, learning how to learn behavior is the foundation, is the base of the house. If you have a strong or solid base, then your house will be fine. It will not collapse. Similarly, if our students has good learning how to learn behavior, you can build or you can teach many skills, such as communication, language, social, self-help, motor skills, etc. If our students do not have good learning how to learn behavior, of course, you can still teach him or teach her, but you will see a very inconsistent performance. Just like you don't have a strong base for a house, your house will collapse anytime. So when it comes to using reinforcement to motivate our students to learn, we always focus on using reinforcement to reinforce good learning how to learn behavior. So you don't just want to provide reinforcement when the students perform correctly, but more important, you want them to try hard. You want them to stay calm. You want them to pay attention. You want them to follow instructions. So if students has good learning how to learn behavior and respond to you correctly, you may want to provide very big reinforcement. If the student is able to perform correctly, but he does not perform well, he does not display good learning how to learn behavior, sometimes we may not want to provide reinforcement because it's not good enough. When the student is performing good learning how to learn behavior, even though he may not answer you correctly or perform the task correctly, we still want to provide some form of encouragement because learning how to learn behavior are the foundations of learning. If our students can display good learning how to learn behavior, you will find learning faster and you will see more consistent performance. So the target behavior for us to use reinforcement should be not just correctness, but also good learning how to learn behavior. Of course, we also want to make sure our students learn something on top of learning how to learn behavior. So when it comes to motivating our students to learn, we also want to make sure that we set different types of demands so that the students will have the skills to learn. Think about it. If a student doesn't have the skill, for example, he doesn't understand language, he is not able to express himself, even though the student is very motivated to learn, he may not use and different types of prerequisite skills. So it is important that we want to equip our students with different types of skills, and it is important that we have to include different types of curriculum or tasks in our program. On top of learning how to learn behavior, we also want our students to learn to behave well. We understand that language and communication skills are very important. Self-help and organization, emotional regulation, social and play skills are all very critical skills that will help our students to learn more skills. And when we design our programs, it is important that we have to have clear objective. When we have clear objective, then we can use reinforcement contingently, which means that we can provide reinforcement when the students meet our expectation, and we do not provide reinforcement when the students does not meet our expectation. And the prerequisites, we have to have very clear objective. Our expectations should be age appropriate and functional. It is important that we teach our students to learn functional skills so that after the therapy session or outside the therapy session, the students can apply the skills in natural learning environment. And when the students is able to apply the skills in natural learning environment, they will be able to experience natural positive outcomes. For example, very simple example, if we teach our students to say car, because he likes to play toy car very much, this is a very functional skills because outside a session, when the student is able to say car, it is likely that he will get a car from his parents. Then the students will feel that, oh, speaking car, this word is very powerful. Using speech is very effective. But let's say if we force the students to learn something like shape, okay, to recognize triangle. Well, I'm not saying that this is not useful, but maybe for a 3-year-old boy, he may not be able to experience the benefit of understanding triangle. Okay, so if we have to pick between recognizing the word triangle versus saying car for a 3-year-old boy, I'll definitely pick car so that the students can enjoy using speech for effective communication. So this is one example on how we have to think about our expectations. You can see that there are some core or foundational skills or important thing that we have to include in our curriculum. It is important that we have to make sure we have a lot of reinforcement available, so we have to develop reinforcement on an ongoing basis. When it comes to using reinforcement to reinforce behavior, we want to focus on effort, learning how to learn behavior, such as meaningful attending, compliance, teaching our students to stay calm. Some students may have behavioral issues, and it is important for them to learn how to tolerate different types of stress and have self-control so that they can stay calm and behave well for learning effectively. So we have good reinforcement, we have good behavior and learning how to learn behavior, and we can build many different types of skills based on the student's functioning level, such as one example that I have here is we can provide, we can teach students to play independently and learn how to play with different people, help students to experience power of speech so that he can use speech in communication, help them to develop language, help them to maybe articulate the speech better by doing some verbal imitation program. So this is just one example, and usually our curriculum is far more comprehensive. But the key is we want to focus on reinforcement, learning how to learn behavior, and good behavior as the foundations for us to build more other skills on top of it. When it comes to teaching, I talk about reinforcement, I talk about target behavior. I think the other thing that we also need to consider is how to perform or how to conduct the teaching. One technique that I suggest we could consider to use is called behavioral momentum. The purpose of behavioral momentum is to help our students to get to the learning stage so that they can learn something more difficult. In other words, we want our students to be more ready to learn. By doing behavioral momentum, we can also reduce their frustration. So by doing this, we can help them or help our students to have a successful learning experience. I think being successful is very important because think about it, if you try very hard to do something, but you always fail and you don't get any acknowledgement because you failed to do it, then you're probably not gonna, you might want to try it one more time, try it like another time, but that will be a time that you want to give up because you don't feel successful. So building behavioral momentum is to help our students to be ready to learn so that they can feel learning is very successful. There are a few techniques that we can use when we build behavioral momentum. First of all, we want to maintain a high success rate. So usually we pick some simple tasks or tasks that students always perform correctly at the beginning, and we provide assistance and reinforcement. at the beginning, and then when the students perform well, for example, because you do some easy tasks, the students can feel the positive experience by looking at you, responding to your instructions, sitting nicely. When you see all this behavior, then you can maybe challenge your students with something a little bit more difficult so that they can learn something new. But by doing that, we also need to use effective assistance. So we provide help, and then we reduce our help so that our students can perform the task independently. Sometimes we might want to go back to something a little bit easier, so that the student doesn't need to always perform the difficult task. I think our goal when we use behavioral momentum is that we want to maintain a success rate at 75 to 80%. I don't think we need to maintain a success rate at 100% because it means that we are doing something too simple, and students may not be able to learn through making mistakes, and maybe it's too easy for them. We don't want to necessarily make our teaching too challenging, so maybe 50% success rate, 40% success rate is too hard, and students may find it defeated, or they may feel that even they try hard, they don't get a lot of successful experience. So 75 to 80% is kind of cool, but of course, I mean, depending on the students, some students may need a little bit higher success rate, and some students may actually learn more effectively with a lower success rate. When it comes to building momentum, it is also important that we have to create a good rhythm, organize your materials well, and so that you don't create a lot of downtime. Usually at the beginning, we want to make our teaching more packed. If students, especially for students who display some interfering behavior, and we also need to consider how long we want to do the session. Some students may be able to do a session for 30 minutes, but some students may behave better if you shorten the sessions to 5 or 10 minutes. It really depends on the performance. It depends on the task. It depends on how much reinforcement you have. And more importantly, it depends on your teaching approach. My experience is that sometimes when we use a more fun, interesting teaching approach, students are just more motivated to learn, and they don't have to rely on those external reinforcement because learning itself is fun. How do we make our teaching approach more engaging? I think we can consider varying many different variables such as locations, instructions, use different type of materials. When we praise our students, when we talk to our students, we use different tones and facial expression. We include different programs and tasks in our curriculum. We don't just stick to one distance, but we vary distance. Sometimes we stand up when we teach, sometimes we sit down when we teach. We don't just teach in one workstation. Sometimes we want to go out, sometimes we go to a different room. And sometimes when we teach, we can use thematic teaching or activity-based teaching, which means that we create an activity when we teach a certain program. For example, if I want to teach our students to learn different labels, maybe I can pretend that we're going shopping. So students can, put a trolley and there are many food on the shelf, and we can ask them to get banana, apple, or different types of stuff so that they can learn labels through the shopping activity. So this is just one example on how we vary our teaching and use different types of reinforcement system during our teaching. In terms of reinforcement, maybe at the beginning we can provide reinforcement more immediately, and then over time we can delay the reinforcement. We could use more toys and maybe food or something tangible at the beginning, but ultimately we want to use more social reinforcement because it's more natural. At the beginning of teaching, maybe we can set up the learning environment in a structured setting, in a familiar room, where the students can sit down and learn. But for young kids, sometimes we will learn on the floor. We can learn in other rooms, or we can even learn in a community or in somewhere outside the building. In terms of system, maybe at the beginning we can use token system, and then we can use something more natural, such as timer ultimately, we don't use token anymore. So the students have to self-evaluate and self-monitor themselves. To learn how to talk or how to say something, we can start with touching head, and then touching mouth, and then open mouth, like, and then ultimately, we want them to say ah. We can use token to reinforce different types of behavior at the beginning. Maybe we reinforce the students for sitting nicely, and then the student has to sit nicely and pay good attention, and then he has to pay more effort, and ultimately he has to pay effort as well as doing stuff correctly. I think what I want to say is, when we apply all these skills, such as use of reinforcement, behavioral momentum, setting expectation, ultimately, we want our students to be able to learn in a very natural environment, such as school or community. So reinforcement, yes, at the beginning, we might want to use external reinforcement, but ultimately, we want students to learn through natural outcome. We want them to learn because they want to get social approval. We might want to develop their intrinsic motivation so that they can learn because they want to have a sense of achievement and satisfaction. Setting, ultimately, we want students to be able to motivate to learn in group settings such as school and community. At the beginning, when we motivate students to learn, we may need to use explicit system, but ultimately, we don't want to use any system at all. At the beginning, when we expect our students to do tasks, we may want to do something simple, or we have to carefully select our tasks. But ultimately, we want our students to be able to motivate to learn for whatever task at any time. And tokens could be used at the beginning, but ultimately, we don't want to use them at all. As I said at the very beginning, I think it's extremely important that we recognize our students' strengths, weaknesses, and their preference, because teaching is not a one-way process. We teach and we want students to learn. And to be honest, I feel that I always learn from our students. So I think what I want to say here is, we have to pay respect. We have to do our teaching with respect. We've been working with many students, and we recognize that they are very capable, and they have their own different unique characteristics. We cannot apply one skills to everyone. So what I want to clarify here is, as much as we could use the skills or techniques that I recommend, I think the ultimate thing, or the most important thing, is we really want to understand our students very well and be respectful. For their strength, we want to develop, we want to expand their strength. When they have weaknesses, we want to help them to learn skills so that they can be better. Sometimes we have to acknowledge their preference, and sometimes we also want to provide them with choices so that they can pick what they want to learn, where they want to learn, what kind of reinforcement they want to get, or what kind of system they want to use during the learning process. So I'm very happy that I've been working with so many students, and I can witness so many remarkable improvements. I hope you have the similar experience, because I think these are the motivation for us to continue to do our good job with our students and parents. Thank you very much.